Well, hello and greetings. This is Josh Lane with the Eight Shields Institute, and we are interviewing Janani and Siddharth from Growing in Nature. And very excited to hear about your project there and what you're doing, implementing village building strategies and other nature connection mentoring techniques into your community there. And today we're going to have a chance to hear from Janani and Siddharth about what they've been doing, their learning journey that's led them to this point, and get to hear some inspiring stories about what they've seen working and how the village builders experience has supported that, as well as other learning strategies from Eight Shields. So thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, very excited to get to share and chat and reflect.
So awesome. Yeah. So maybe we could start. Just tell us a little bit about each of yourselves and about your Growing in Nature project.
Yeah. So I was 18 when I started working with Eight Shields, and I pulled together GRIN, or Growing in Nature. It was 5 years ago. And we've been working to connect children to nature in India, in Bangalore mostly. And we're specifically trying to see if we can use social entrepreneurship and village building to build a network of mentors who enable nature connection for children. So it's been exciting to look at the powerful methods that HEOs has and translate that to our context and see how that works here. Siddharth has just joined us at GRIN, but he's been doing a lot of village building otherwise as well. Yeah.
So I'm Siddharth. I just returned after 5 years of working on my PhD at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul, on the other side of the world, in the US. And I've been a community organizer for a good long time now, hitting 10 years, I realized, even though I've only sort of explicitly recognized it for the last 2 years. And part of that recognition came from doing a renewal of Creative Path with Eight Shields, back when Janani invited me to join the Village Builders program with her. So the village I've been building for the last year has been a local chapter of Science for the People, which is a growing movement of scientists, STEM educators, and workers who are seeking to really be their whole selves in science society, and sort of work towards what is the intersection between our activism, our morals, and the work that we do professionally. How do we bring that all together? So that's been where I've really applied my village building principles as I've been learning them in the past year.
Wow, this is such an exciting intersection of interests and passions right here. And, locally with the GRIN project, what were some of the needs that have been identified? What are some of the motivating factors that helped this particular project get started? What was the need that was perceived there locally?
So there's an interesting sort of intersection of people and needs that I'm working with at the moment. We have children from urban spaces, we have children from rural spaces, and that's quite different in India. The level of nature experience and connection is very different in those two contexts. And children in urban spaces really need people who will take them out and play with them in nature. And we have a whole bunch of people who are from rural spaces who have moved into the city for a more aspirational life. And they have an entire gamut of nature experience and stories and ways of relating. And none of that is given value. They are instead given manual labor sort of work, which can be difficult in India in some of these contexts. And I would like to see if their desire, their need of having a good earning career can be met through their nature experience. I'm trying to see if one group of people who can be mentors and one group of people who need mentors can meet in the middle.
Wow, that's so exciting.
It's a little bit tricky. Yeah, that's a simplistic way of putting it. There's all the different speed bumps along the way. Yeah.
Gotcha. So we'll return a bit more to the details of what you've been kind of putting down onto the ground through your project. But how did you get started with Eight Shields? Because Siddharth, you were just mentioning renewal of creative path and coming into that. But Janani, when you got started, what helped you, start to learn some of these strategies that you're now using?
My first Eight Shields call was on my 18th birthday, which was really fun. But I was 16 when I started working with people and nature in different ways. And I sort of saved up for 2 years to be able to afford that first course, because rupees and dollars convert kind of funnily. um, and I had been following H. Shields for a while, following John in the Wilderness Awareness School and all of those things for a good long time. And I think I signed up first for the Creating Nature Connected Communities course, which I think I hear that was one of the predecessors of village building as it stands now. A lot of the material that we're going through I've seen it over the last 5 or 6 years of working with Shields. Each time it's interesting to revisit it and then see, am I holding the 8 directions fully in each of these projects? Am I these different ways of doing things fully? I think one thing that's been exciting for me is how it almost feels like the core of most principles of Eight Shields is this idea of regeneration. And that's so important in my work today because I'm hoping to create a network of people who can generate further people within the network, who can generate further mentors within the network. And it depends not on me, but on the collective. So in so many ways, some of these principles have helped me question what am I missing here, what am I missing here, and fit that in. To answer the question, I think I started with the whole thing all at once.
Wow. So as you've, started your project, and I remember, back when you did get started and we got to work together on some things, but to let folks know, like, what has this looked like as you've laid out these stages of connection and village building in the past 5 years? What have been a few landmarks along the way of things that have been implemented and made impact locally?
The first year of my work with H Shields was very personal. It was very about me and my embodied experience and sort of settling in place a whole bunch of things. I remember this one call where I think John had posed this question as a follow-up to somebody's reflection, or maybe it was the topic. I can't remember now. But when you see another person succeed, what do you feel? And for me, that first year was transitioning from envy to joy. And to be able to discover and be fully happy with my own experience of life and take that into my work and do that. I had this so I have village building on sort of two levels of my work. There's one level of a platform of social entrepreneurs that I'm part of, and 2 to 3 years was spent building the village of that platform. So enabling us to help each other, enabling a good relationship between mentors on that platform and all of us as peers, enabling us to be sustainable and supporting each other in that. And at the same time, enabling Grim to figure out what does eight shields mean in an Indian context. What does bird life mean in an Indian context? What do all of these things that we talk about in Coyote's Guide when you're working with children? How do I translate that into a strongly existing culture, sometimes into different languages, different levels of resource? So I think I worked with like 100,000 individuals
Wow.
over those 2 to 3 years in different contexts, trying to understand that. And the last couple of years has been an experiment to see if I can build a village outside myself that does the work that Green does. And that's been an adventure. It's been an adventure. I think so. I'm right now 9 months pregnant, and we would probably be expecting a baby in a couple of weeks' time. And I've already sort of taken a step back from actively working, and I will be out of it for 2 months. But some of those projects are still running without me present, which I'm very grateful for. And I see possibilities of building a large network of people who take up these projects without me present. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. And that's a great highlight of what we call the bottleneck principle, where, one person becomes the key to keeping everything moving. But of course, that's not sustainable. So it's so great that you're, so quickly within 5 years addressing that as a design, principle to look at. Yeah. Those are some great milestones though, because was it just you kind of working with kids as you started when you first started this? Was this a solo project at the very beginning, or did you also have some other folks helping right at the start of this?
Like I said, I started with that platform of social entrepreneurs. In some ways, I was very lucky to have people who are interested in being a village, but it was definitely a project that I was spearheading. I was the bottleneck for a good long time. Yeah.
Wow. So that's so helpful for folks tuning into this, just to think about yourself for all those watching this, that bottleneck principle. And it's a great village building lesson. How can we build that village of support so that we don't have to try to hold things ourselves? Because really it takes a village to lift up the village. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that for us. And Siddharth, with your past experience that you mentioned, and now coming into Village Builders, what are some of the strategies that you're hearing and experiencing there that are really exciting and lighting up for you that you want to move forward, or that you have been moving forward?
Yeah, so I've surprisingly had a very parallel journey to Janani's, but um, as I've said on multiple calls with HCL, um, my focus has largely been people connection because I've been operating in spaces where people are very disconnected from each other. But in the last year, have also taken that organizing quite a bit into environmental justice as well. And so what's been really interesting is sort of um, creating cultures of deep listening and sort of uh, in places where people are trying to uh, so working in academic spaces and professional spaces where people are really like cut up into different pieces. That was um, that was sort of an early observation and an early learning that people really like, and uh, truly I was doing that myself. Um, and so in the process of learning, and the renewal of creative path was the first time I'd made an inventory of all the things I care about. And then to say, oh, that is me, not like this tiny bit. That my professional environment has been reflecting to me as being me. Uh, it was accompanied by also like starting a relationship with Janani, where she was actually that is me. So the same. So a mentor early on introduced me to the idea of how do you invite whole people into rooms and create spaces where whole people can trust bringing their whole selves in. And so with that, with um, so I entered Eight Shields, the village building program, with wanting to understand what are structures and principles that can govern a lot of what I've been doing, um, and so learning about wiping off the road dust, gratitude, the whole ACON model, and implementing little bits of it. Um, the um, ways of creating reciprocity in a group, um, and the containers for conversations. I've done a lot of sort of facilitation of events, of workshops, um, ranging from nature connection to like anti-racism and anti-colonialism work, um, which is all basically just people like connecting deeper to to themselves and to their relatives. And it's been interesting to, after this year and a half or 2 years of really engaging with a framework of how to do it, to then go into so many spaces and then be able to say, like this part is not there, we can try and insert it in this way. But also sort of um, I think I used to be very like engineering minded about this. I was always sort of looking for um, what is the structure that if we create, it will sustain itself. And over the years, I've sort of shifted to there's no point creating the perfect structure unless you have like motivated people. So let's just focus on the people, and let's just focus on motivating people and giving them the tools. And I'm really glad it's actually now been a year since that group of us came together as a bunch of friends who felt like our um, whole self, like our passions for wanting to really change the way the world is operating right now, especially with regard to environmental justice, um, came together and said, "Oh, we want to start the Science for the People chapter." And it's a year later. I did a lot of the early connecting, but I've been away from Minnesota for a month, and I barely said a thing, and everything's rolling on. And it's just so happy to connect with people, sort of like um, being able. I think if I hadn't had the framework that village building and HC have given me, I would not have, this group would not have been where it is today. Um, we might have unconsciously practiced different parts of it. In fact, when we introduced any bit of it, it was always unconscious. Or I wouldn't tell people or bring it into their consciousness that this is a structure we are following. But then in January, when we did a half-day retreat of what have we done well, what do we want to do better, deep listening, all those things. When I hadn't ever said that I want a culture of deep listening, we should have these things. We just did it. So yeah, I'm now introduced, like it was only 3 months ago that I introduced them to Eight Shields and said, like, here's how it works. Here's what's been driving some of the structures that I've been putting in place. But I don't want to show anyone the structures beforehand, because that just then I don't know. I don't think that pedagogy works.
The Coyote Medal.
Yeah. Oh yes, I haven't read the Coyotes guide. That's okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so there's so many pieces in there in that journey from fragmentation to holism in the approach, and then building motivation. Speaking of motivation, we have a chainsaw going outside now during the interview. But it's so inspiring to hear that, and then to just see what happens when through building that motivated connection in the community, how everybody gets empowered to step into the pieces they hold their passion for, and now you can step away from that and it's self-sustaining, and just seeing that is awesome. So a lesson for everybody in what's possible. And then not even having to get didactic about it, but here's a piece we can try, and seeing how people take it and what they do with it with their own creativity. And then one of my mentors once said that we have an intellectual immune system, and it's hard sometimes for outside ideas to come into a person's mind, because it's like, ooh, what is that? Is that, I don't know what that is. So we have to kind of take the concept and kind of make it our own, and then suddenly our mind accepts it and goes, oh yeah, okay, that's okay. So I love your approach and how you've done that with the village building tools of like, okay, here's something we can try, and let's see what we do with it. And people make it their own, and it sounds like they're running with it, and making an impact. So inspired to hear that. And looking back on this journey that you've both had so far with this, who would you recommend, like the village builder training process for? Who would be a good candidate for that? Like, what would they be looking to do, or what would their mindset be, perhaps?
I think hmm, I like the word that Siddharth uses, that word to identify as a community organizer. I think somebody who identifies with that word would definitely find meaning here. I also feel like, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who is responsible for the community of people that we're working with, I found great value um, in enabling my organizational structure to follow the HCS method. I know I've also seen um, people who, if you feel like you hold the capacity to influence a lot of people around you, and you see pain and disconnection and you want to change that, I think um, HU's village building is a very powerful set of tools for that. What do you think?
I feel like also, as compared to some of the other HE courses, this one would be really helped by having a good amount of self-awareness before coming into it, of what your passions are, um, what you feel are your skills that you bring in, because I think it's important uh, to know those boundaries in a way, so that you uh, then when village building, you cultivate people to take up all the other things that are not your passions and your skills, and you start seeing how people fit together. I feel also um, it requires people who are willing to be patient, um, and I don't think that was, like, thinking about this particular village, it was a dear friend of mine who always was always holding me back and saying, or not holding me back, who was always like reminding me to move at the speed of relations, um, to borrow from Adrienne Marie Brown. Um, and so I think, and John also says this quite a bit, that this is a long game that we're in, and entering village building without having a goal in mind of, in 1 year I will have this and that together. Just like, be have that self-awareness, like be prepared, but also like let it grow as it grows.
But I also think one thing that is always so I have sort of been involved with village building in the various forms that it's been going on for the past 5 years, right?
Mm.
And I think the people I've seen take most out of the courses immediately. I'm not very sure down over the years how they apply it in their life, but over that year that I talk to them regularly, people who take a lot out of it are the people who have a space to practice it.
Mm.
So if you are part of a group of people, or you are trying to enable a group of people to happen, and you're willing to practice, then I
Mhm.
think then is a good time to start the village building course. It
Mm.
need not be your end goal sort of reaching. It need not be um, that you are building at a specific level or a specific size of community, but a space to practice what you're reading, I think really drives the lessons home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I know a lot of folks, learn about these programs and they wonder, okay, is this for me? And I think hearing some reflections from some seasoned village builders who, implemented and, put things into action, that's where the transformation happens, and you're really highlighting that. And I think I've heard you both during this interview here spoken about a couple of things: renewal of creative path as a way to kind of tune into, what am I passionate about, what is important to me, and that identification process of, okay, where am I feeling connected, where am I finding some room for growth, perhaps, and new connections to focus on. Um, and then also, Janani, you were mentioning, taking that first program with Eight Shields as time for yourself to experience your own connection process and go deeper with that. And, for those reasons, really, in many ways, we consider village builders to be sort of a year two kind of a training, where we recommend folks to go into rebuilding nature connected communities first and really have that time to get out to their sit spot and connect with the 8 natural archetypes inside themselves, and then how to then understand, because they've embodied it, how to then bring it forward more through all the village processes. Um, but then, of course, there's that potential to go right into village builders, like Siddharth, you're talking about, through your past experience, being ready to go in there and then doing that renewal process, and finding your own path in there. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure process. I guess I'd like to highlight that for people. But you can always, for those of you who are thinking about these programs and you have questions, you can always write in to support@8shields.org and ask, and talk to somebody about, is this the best fit for where I'm at? So it's just really been a treat to get to hear from both of you and reflect back on your own journey so far with village building. And I'm so excited to see where you're going to take it next and what opportunities are going to emerge as you keep your intentions and your actions moving forward. So, any last words of wisdom or thoughts you'd like to share with folks tuning into this today?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking, based on what you just said, that another thing that's been great about this is um, the way it shields models um, creating connective containers and all of that, to drop into these weeks with village talk and these like my twice in a month calls with village building. I've not really met very many of these people I've spoken to, um, and 1.5 hours or 1 hour 45 minutes a week is a solid amount of time. But it's just incredible to have that connective, reflective space, um, and meet all these people from far-flung places who are um, who, who are doing this. And I think for a lot of people who are feeling alone, or slightly lonely in thinking about this kind of work and not knowing where to go with it, having this community is really, really important. And I think
Yeah.
Eight Shields has really taken the time to build that, and in all calls, everyone who's facilitating, even the small group facilitators, really um, make the effort to approach every conversation with that sense of newness that is really welcoming and really essential to keeping the community going.
Yeah. And actually, that kind of ties into the thought that was on my mind also. Is that I've been able to take that spirit of what those calls have meant for me and be able to embody that with the people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have access to such resources as part of the village building program, I am able to pull out that particular resource that that person in my village needs and either translate it to them or give it to them. And that's been a great library to sort of dip into as and
Mm-hmm.
when needed. Village building is so far it's been a 1 year course, but when you join it, you join this group of people who would become a lifelong community.
Mm.
And uh, I, you can't disconnect from an HEOS course. um, so you're you're saying that you'll give a specific amount of time for this 1 year, but you're also saying I would like to connect with you for life, and that I will be nourished by this connection for life. So yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, it's such a honor to get to hear your story and hear what's moving and just feel that network of support that you are uh, helping to grow in your community and in the different projects you're working on. And where can people go to learn more about what you're doing? Where would you direct people? So I'm sure they'll be curious.
Yeah. Well, Grin has a website, growinginnature.com. And most of that is the outward facing sort of what we do, kind of specific programs and projects. But there's a way to contact me on that website. And I should probably update the website soon. Yeah. What about you?
Oh, that village. Well, www.scienceforthepeople.org is the sort of more national movement. Our local gang hasn't done that much in terms of a website. But if you contact Janani, you can contact me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited for folks to learn about what you're doing. And I think this has been really helpful for folks who are considering the village building pathway to hear these reflections. And no doubt this will be food for thought and about just the possibility of what can emerge when there's some intention put into these connective practices. Um, I know I'm inspired through this conversation. So thank you so much. And for folks who are perhaps watching this video, I'm not sure exactly where this will be posted, but of course you can go to 8shields.org and check out the Mentoring Pathways tab to learn more about village builders and opportunities around that and other programs. So thank you both for joining me today. And thank you everybody who's tuned in here.
Thank you.
Thank you.